And welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host for this afternoon, Rachel Stockman, and we are going to take you back live into this alleged serial killer trial that we are following out of the Ohio area just as soon as it goes back live, and I'd say about 45 minutes or so. In the meantime, I want to bring in one of our favorite guests, Mark Eiglarsh. He's on the line right now. Mark, what do you make of this case? We were just listening to some of the opening statements from the prosecution, and he clearly said they have DNA evidence, they found his signature sexual device, and they have a confession in this case. Why are they going to trial, Mark?
Well, because they don't have a busload of nuns who saw him do it. That's the only thing that's missing.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, this is, you know, every prosecutor's dream case, except, of course, for the horrific nature of it in terms of having the evidence lined up. But what are the possibilities? Why didn't he just enter that guilty plea? Is it because perhaps he refused to do so? He's going down the insanity route. Of course, death is on the table for this case.
Okay, I'll give you the reasons. Number one, he ain't all there. Let's start with that. Right? I mean, rational people do not do what he's alleged or what he has confessed to doing. Okay? So when you sit down with people like that, and I've had many as clients, not that many, but I've had some, they're not rational. You're thinking on one plane, they're thinking on another, and you don't really meet. So his thought is, why am I going to walk into a life sentence? At least let's try it. It'll give me hope. Because in 5 years, you know, or so, when this hits the appellate court and they finally choose to do something because some weird question was asked during jury selection, I might get a new trial. This is fun for me.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been a kind of very gruesome case to follow. We saw some of those crime scene photos yesterday. And one of the investigators in the case, that's the house where they found the bodies there, you can see. And one of the investigators in the case, they didn't show the pictures on camera, thank goodness, because I'll tell you, I didn't want to see it, was describing how they found these women. One of the women was found decomposing with maggots on her body. And, you know, it seems like he picked women that were very vulnerable and had issues. You know, these were women that maybe weren't all there themselves. Right.
Well, easy prey, right? But under the law, it doesn't matter, you know. And I think that those photographs, you know, as much as I object as a defense lawyer, they're very relevant to a jury oftentimes just to show the state of the body, you know, what he did, the devil's in the detail. I think they need to see that type of stuff.
And Mark, as we continue to monitor this case, and as I mentioned to you, we're going to go back live into that courtroom in Ohio when testimony begins in a few minutes. I want to turn quickly to another case that we were covering, just because it's been one that's been shocking all of us, the verdict, and that's the Tex McIver case. I know you were on as a commentator on the Law and Crime Network several times where we are covering this case because it went on for 6 weeks. I have to tell you, I literally fell out of my seat when I heard the verdict. I want to hear your reaction, Mark.
Well, first, having covered these trials for decades now, that's the last thing I do is fall out of my seat. Because what's reasonably foreseeable is that jurors who are in that courtroom will make a decision that you don't necessarily predict. The biggest thing to remember is we're not in that courtroom. There's something missing. You can watch most of the trial on your wonderful network, but you're missing the flavor. You're missing the eye contact. You're missing stuff that they're seeing. And you just have to defer to them. I generally think jurors get it right.
But in this one, though, I had been reading up on some of the juror interviews, which really are so fascinating. A lot of times you don't actually hear from the jurors. They won't talk after a verdict comes out. But when you actually get to hear some of what they said, it makes me really wonder if this was not a case of such a divided set of jurors that they just chose this conviction. And again, if you're just joining us and you don't know, Tex McIver, who was that prominent Atlanta attorney who was on trial for murdering, prosecutors say he intentionally murdered his wife. He said it was an accident. earlier this week he was found guilty not of malice murder, but of felony murder, aggravated assault, and a weapons charge, and witness tampering. But where I question this verdict is because, from what I understand, the jurors were divided between malice murder, ag assault, and some of the lesser charges, and they apparently thought this felony murder charge would be kind of like a split the baby, in other words, a compromise. Okay. There's a problem with that, though.
No, but says you. You know, ultimately,
yes.
we can second guess, we can analyze, but I'm sure that the defense didn't waive their right to have the jurors polled. I always say, I want to look the jurors in the eyes and make sure that they said, yes, that is my verdict. And every single one of them, independently and collectively, said, yes, that is my verdict. We're done.
Wow, Mark, you're really playing the role of the prosecutor here. This is very unusual for you.
I just feel how I feel, and I speak from my heart. You know, we second guess, we say this, that. They were in the jury room, and absent any kind of something nefarious that we hear, it is a tough job being a juror, and sometimes they do compromise. But
do you think they knew if they were sending him to life, mandatory sentence of life in prison, that is the same exact thing as malice murder? They would have said, okay, this is a good compromise, because, yeah, under the law, it's different because of the intent factor. But, you know, realistically, the truth is the same. The charges are basically the same in terms of penalty for Tex McIver.
I asked that same question in cases where, let's say, one of my clients brings a suitcase from here to there because they have to pay for their child's operation. And by bringing that suitcase containing a minimum mandatory amount of drugs, they're now going to prison for, you know, a 25-year minimum mandatory. What the sentence is, as much as we want them to know about it in certain instances, cannot be considered by the jury. So what we have, again, absent any evidence to the contrary, is that they decided the elements to that offense were met. And then that's it. We can second guess it all we want, but again, you know, you're powerless over it. They made that decision. They all said that was their decision. You're done.
All right. Well, very interesting, Mark. We will continue to follow this case because, you know what, the defense attorneys, Tex McIver's defense attorneys, promised that they're appealing this. So no doubt that they're.
Really? We vow to appeal. I say that all the time, too. Well, of course, you know, you're not going to sit back and accept a potential life sentence. You're gonna appeal because that's what you do.
And interestingly, we're going to have the prosecutor, Clint Rucker, who prosecuted this case and gave a very, I don't know if you caught it, Mark, very dramatic closing argument. He's going to be on the network tomorrow, so we're going to be asking him some of these questions about the case and how they're going to tackle a possible appeal, especially when it has to do with the jurors being allowed inside the vehicle to kind of test it out themselves. I think that's a very appealable issue, don't you, Mark?
No, but I mean, listen, anything can be appealed, but generally, listen, and forgive me for my skepticism, I have actually at least one murder case up on appeal, and as much as I'm that delusional fellow who thinks that the judge did something wrong and it's going to come back, I am realistic, and I know that the appellate court generally is not in the business of reversing murder convictions. That said, they can still say, yeah, you know what, the jurors shouldn't have been in there, and I'm not saying that that's what they're going to say, but in a worst case scenario, they could say, you know what, they shouldn't have been in there, it was error for the judge to do that, but it was harmless error.
Mm-hmm.
You know, wouldn't have made a difference in the outcome of the trial. And that's what they're going to do.
Absolutely. And, you know, we kind of have a black eye here on the Law and Crime Network because there weren't that many of us that were thinking that the prosecution had a very strong case. And like you said, this is why it's so important to remember we're watching this on a video feed, or even if we're watching it from the gallery of a courtroom, we're not in that jury box. We're not in that deliberation room, and we're not seeing that evidence literally firsthand. So it makes all the difference in the world.
I'll throw in one other point. It's theater. So they're studying all the actors when your camera is focused on just one witness on the stand. So they're looking at the defendant's reaction. They're seeing how he acts when they think that he's not on. and they're studying him, and they're not supposed to, but they're making conclusions based upon body language, energy, eye contact, everything. So that's why I always defer to them, and I say, here's what I think the jurors might do, but I don't know.
Well, and that's why we all here at the Law and Crime Network just love watching these trials unfold, because they are kind of like mini movies where you really you can think you know what the outcome is, like we all said here very arrogantly that no way are they going to get a murder conviction on this, and we were all wrong. But,
that's human. Good.
Yeah, that's
because you listen to that Jesse fella.
Yeah.
Don't listen to that Jesse fella. What does he know?
Never listen to Jesse Weber, people. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. We're going to continue listening to some more testimony in this other case that we're following, this suspected serial killer, Sean Great, who's on trial in Ohio. It's been a very disturbing yet fascinating case to follow. I want us to continue listening into the prosecution's opening statements.